when you look at Netflix, a stock that's moved a lot, you think about size, you think about scale, and bigger is better. Size matters. Might makes right. Mo bigger, mo better. That's why we tend to look at these companies. But for Netflix, that was a problem, because when Sony pulled their movies from Netflix, and from Starz is actually the way it worked, as you explained, because Netflix has too many subscribers. Who knew this was a problem? And this happens in the midst of Netflix shifting its focus from delivering discs in the mail to delivering discs by streaming. Now, Sony is an important player for Netflix on many counts, not least of which because of movies like Salt and The Social Network, which they'd been promoting, or Spider-Man and all the Spider-Man sequels. Because investors are looking for those, the users are looking for those kinds of movies on the site. And investors have been looking at the growth of the business. And when they look at the growth in that business, what they're really looking at is subscriber growth. If you look at our chart of subscriber growth, you can see in the last 6 quarters, this company has gone from 11 million subscribers to nearly 23 million subscribers. That seemed like it was a good thing, but what Netflix never warned people was that Sony could pull out of their deal with Starz, effectively pulling the Sony movies right off of Netflix because they got so big. So all of the investors who are looking at Netflix thinking bigger is better were surprised to find out this is a problem for providing content, which of course is the king when it comes to Netflix. Finally, what's really important here is the gross margins and how it's changing for this business. Now, when they switched from mailing discs to streaming, their gross margins, actually, their improvement of gross margin change, they continued to get better, albeit with a big bump in the road in the fourth quarter of 2010. Why? Because they no longer had the cost of sending discs through the mail. That seems like good news, but the real costs of providing content have yet to hit Netflix when it comes to streaming. We can see some of that cost when Sony is able to pull themselves out of this deal this week. Emily?
Thanks, Cory. Now, Netflix, of course, needs content for its business, and the content providers need on-demand distribution to stay competitive in the world Netflix has created. It's a world where consumers expect to access what they want when they want. Cliff Edwards knows both sides of this equation. He's one of the 65 reporters and editors in our San Francisco bureau, and he covers Netflix and content providers like Sony. So, Cliff, first of all, what is your take on this? How big a blow is losing Sony to Netflix?
Well, it's really interesting. We've talked to sources on the Hollywood side, and they say it's sort of a curious thing that they feel like Netflix fell asleep at the switch here. They said Netflix has known all along that there was a limit, a cap on the number of subscribers that were allowed to get Starz Play, and Netflix knew they were reaching that cap. We presume it's about 20 million users, which was where they were. They were shortly under that number at the last earnings. So apparently, once they reached that cap, it's sort of like, you know, you either pay for a new magazine subscription or you don't. And so now these guys are saying they have to go back and renegotiate with Starz, which then has to turn around and renegotiate with Sony for this content. The other thing is Netflix may be just simply using this as a negotiating ploy, looking to see whether they need that content, whether the consumers really miss it.
Yeah, no, it raises a lot of questions. There was no disclosure about such a cap in any of the filings that I went through today. In fact, Sony's mentioned quite often as one of their great partners. They've given every indication to investors, certainly, and to users that the social network was coming, that Sony's going to be a valuable content partner. Not that Sony was going away.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. That's what our sources are saying. They're really surprised that Netflix didn't say anything about this. They said Netflix has known about it all along, and either they're all off on vacation for the summer, or there's something else behind it.
Well, let me ask about that. So we didn't know about a secret cap on users from Sony. Could other studios be far behind?
Well, what happens with these contracts is they negotiate. This is always in the fine print. When they do these licensing deals, they have them, they're pages and pages long, and somewhere in those pages they say this is the amount of users you can stream this to. And in fact, Netflix in their 10Ks they make some oblique reference to that they pay per subscriber, and that they may have to pay more eventually.
Right, but we didn't know that it could end, or that a content provider that a studio could pull out.
Clear that.
I mean, and this is the whole thing with Netflix. If you can't get the movies you want, why would you bother with Netflix?
Well, what they're trying to do anyway is that they're moving away from trying to give you that sort of first-run content and moving into sort of catch-up television and catch-up movies, things that you may have seen once or twice before and that, you'll want to see again because you have nostalgia for H.R. Puffin stuff.
Who doesn't have nostalgia for H.R. Puffin stuff? Yeah, that's the comment about how many reruns that actually makes up Netflix content. All right. Cliff, thank you very much for joining us. It's a fascinating story, this Netflix, and we'll keep watching. Emily?